Welcome to this edition of The Need for Courage. I'm your host today, John Byrne, and with me is Sister Helen Prejean. Sister Helen has done quite a bit in her career, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But I wanted to mention she was the author of Dead Man Walking, a famous book looking at the death penalty and the issues with both victims and those on death row in the early 90s that turned into a famous movie. Now there is a graphic edition that just came out that is available on everywhere that you can get books, bookstores, Amazon, that sort of thing. And so Sister Helen is here on campus at Marquette. She just spoke at the law school about these major issues, and we're going to take some time today and dig deep into some of these things. And first, Sister Helen, what's your schedule like? You do quite a bit of speaking and traveling. How's that all going?
Well, getting the graphic out, so I've been on the road a lot, all during March and April. So been to a number of places, Buffalo, in Detroit, with the Felician Sisters, went to 3 of their universities. That happened earlier, and now, I'm here at Marquette, and I was at Dominican High School yesterday. So March and April are really busy. I go to DePaul.
Okay. After
I leave here, because they have the archives of Dead Man Walking. They have the manuscript of the book. And a lot of the archives have been digitized at DePaul University through the library there. And so I spend time with them every year. So I'll be going there when I leave here. And we're going to be celebrating on the 24th of April, Illinois' 15th anniversary of abolishing the death penalty, and Governor Pat Quinn's going to be there at it. And Pope Leo is sending us a message about it because, he was a Chicago person.
Right.
And when Pat Quinn actually signed the bill into law, he got a note from the before then Pope thanking him and congratulating him on having the courage to do it.
I do want to talk to you about the work you did. I don't want to say to get Pope Francis to come out strongly against the death penalty, but obviously you helped move that along. So I want to talk about that. But there's an organization you're connected with called the Ministry Against Death Penalty.
Yeah.
I know you quite a few things. There's a website, and people that want to get involved, that can donate, they can go there and get updates, and they should also
SisterHelen.org.
Yeah.
Just go to SisterHelen.org and you'll see it. It's got the menu on it. And appreciate any kind of contributions people can give to our ministry. So this is just a bunch of plucky nuns that got started supporting me. Here I had this experience of being with this man executed. The sisters buried the man who had been executed in the sisters' burial plot. And the sisters were right with me through this whole thing. And we've been doing it ever since. We collaborate a lot with Catholic Mobilizing Network, which really gets out to the Catholic community to bring them up into Catholic teaching and how it has evolved on the death penalty.
I know you've told this story many, many times, but give us a quick sense of how you arrived to author the book after the experience that you had with death row, and let's talk a bit about that. Obviously, the movie goes into great detail. You got the graphic edition now, but what got you both interested and so engaged in what's obviously a very, very complicated area, in that the way we have these laws in the country and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, of course, I feel like I fell through a laundry chute. I got an invitation when I was living in a poor neighborhood in New Orleans to write a man on death row, and I thought I was only going to be, writing letters. I call it Sneaky Jesus. This is Sneaky Jesus Part 1. So I write the man. His name's Patrick Sonia. He writes back. Next thing you know, I'm visiting him, and 2.5 years later, I am with him when he's electrocuted to death, and I came out of that killing chamber that night, in the middle of the night, threw up in the parking lot, and my mission began because I said the people are never going to get close to this. It's a secret ritual behind prison walls. And so that's what led to the writing of the book. It's what's led to my traveling and giving talks. I've found that if you can bring the people close, kind of surface soul stuff is people hear about a terrible crime and say, look what they did, they deserve to die for the death penalty. And you got to bring them close, and that's what we do. And that's what Dead Man Walking did.
As I mentioned to you before we started to record, way back when, when I ran for political office in the 90s, it was the heavy time of all these crime bills, all these states, if they didn't already have death penalty on the books, were putting them on the books. And many of us, including myself at the time, I'm sort of ashamed to admit, we're for the death penalty. We support our police.
I started out that way too, John.
Oh, yeah, for
well,
what you
that
said.
was the teaching.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember learning, 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. Okay.
Right.
But with the death penalty, that was, the state needed to be able to kill these criminals in order to protect society. And that's been the teaching of the church. Augustine from the 5th century, the evil can be coerced with the sword, all the way to August 2018 when finally Pope Francis changed the catechism. And that's because dialogue is just what happens in the Catholic Church through synodality, people sharing faith experiences from the ground. More and more deacons were going into prisons. The bubbles were coming up in the dialogue. I was part of it, but it was like, do we only uphold the dignity of the innocent, of life of the innocent? What about the guilty?
Let me ask you a couple things. When people that say they support the death penalty, they say what you said earlier on. Somebody committed a horrific act, there's got to be accountability. What about the victims? And I know you care, obviously, about the victims as well. Talk about that, both in the story, the actual facts regarding Dead Man Walking, but its victims' rights are important to you as well.
Well, sure. But it was a mistake I made in the beginning. I didn't know what to do with the victims. I was learning about all this. I mean, you know, all while Tim Robbins was writing the screenplay of the movie, he kept saying the nun is in over her head. And I was. So at first I didn't reach out to the victims' families. I thought they were so angry and in pain, I'd be the last one they'd want to talk to. But I learned from that. And I learned through a particular man, Lloyd LeBlanc, whose son David had been killed. And he was the one, full of grace, who reached out to me and said, Sister, did it ever occur to you, you've been visiting with those 2 brothers that killed our son, that maybe we needed you too? And he invited me to come pray with him in this little chapel. And then we went on the journey together, and he taught me through his own journey about what forgiveness means. And even if you look at the word, John, forgive, it means to give before. And for him, what the experience was, he was so consumed with this hatred, he was losing who he was. He had always been kind, and he's so angry, and now he's making his wife cry. And then he just kept praying, Jesus, you got to help me. And when he came to that point, he just put his hand out like this and said, then I said, they killed our son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. Forgiveness was going to be the road for him. And it's not condoning.
Of course.
But it's like, I'm not going to let it consume me, because then I lose my own life as well.
So the journey since that time in the early 90s to where we are today, it would seem to those of us that are not enmeshed in these issues on a day-to-day basis that we've sort of fallen back again. We have politicians talking more about death penalty, including the president, that I've really ever seen in quite a while. How do you stay both optimistic and committed given, again, these 30, 40 years of working in this space when it seems like some people still don't understand what you've come to understand?
Right. I would call it more hope than optimism.
Okay.
I mean, and hope is an active verb.
Yeah.
Because you're in there and you're doing something. And I know by now, doing this for over 35 years, the hearts of the people actually are good. If you can bring them close, they get it. Actually, we've seen a big shift in this country. 27 states have the death penalty, but in practice, most states either have it by law in the books of abolishment, or in practice, they don't practice.
They don't do it, yeah.
And juries don't give the death penalty much anymore. These, governors like DeSantis in Florida and Texas, they're going to people already sentenced in the 80s and 90s to have them killed, but they're not new death sentences. And we can see there's been a shift in understanding in the people not to support the death penalty. So we just need to keep on that track. That's the gospel track. Of keeping on getting the message out to the people.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I raised it was I just read recently I forget the guy's name who killed the head of United Health, that the Justice Department is asking prosecutors to ask for the death penalty in that situation.
That's the Trump people.
Yes, exactly.
With the Department of Justice.
No question.
They're going for death every chance they can.
And that's...
But, I mean, it kind of stands in contrast, and we got to Pope Leo's just standing right up, man.
Right.
He's just standing right up and talked about peacemaking means you're going and you're healing people, you're educating people, you're helping people have a better life. You're not designating them and demeaning them and killing them. It's the opposite. Blessed are the peacemakers. He keeps standing up for the gospel.
Right.
I love that guy. I'm glad we got this good book.
So there's more than two, but two key reasons about your view on the death penalty. One is, as you said, the dignity of all humans. But the second is the mistakes that have been made, right? I think that seemed to got some, from a political standpoint, some bipartisan support in the past because they recognized all of that. Talk a little bit about...
It's a faulty system, absolutely. There have been over 200 people lucky enough to have gotten a death sentence that could show got the wrong person and have been exonerated. I mean, I'm writing a book right now about a man who's innocent. And the truth has never come out, so we're writing the book about it, and hopefully it's going to help him. But that hits people. You know, they thought, oh, well, they'll never make a mistake. Another thing people thought in the beginning, it's going to deter people. Oh, they got I don't want to kill the witnesses because I could get self-preservation, they thought, would be the greatest thing. And then 2 times they asked the police chiefs of the United States 10 remedies to violence, and they all put the death penalty dead last. And you know why? Because they said the people thinking of consequences and the people committing murder are 2 separate sets of people. And if you're not thinking of consequences, it doesn't deter anybody. The other big thing I'd like to bring out is about the victims.
Yes.
Because prosecutors and politicians use the victims' families to try to justify what they're doing. Right. Like you have DeSantis saying things like, look at these victims' family waiting all this time for their justice. And what that justice, in quotes, means is the average wait from the time that a person gets a death sentence to execution is 17 years. First of all, those families, their grief is going to be public. Every time there's a change in the status of the case, the media is going to be at their door. What they're going to go through by getting the death penalty. And you know, when they're in grief and they're in trauma, and sometimes you see victims' families coming out of a trial with V for victory. We won, he got the death penalty. And then they start waiting. And then when you take it and just get it to what it's really in essence about, it's then finally being called in after all years of waiting, sitting on the front row, and they get to watch as the state kills the one who killed their loved one, and they watch that violence as if that can heal the human heart. And it's so morally bankrupt. It's deeply hypocritical. They're doing that because they want to justify what they're doing and going for the death penalty in their little political thing of being tough on crime.
Right. So there's a federal issue with the death penalty and the states. What has been your work in various states? In the various states, like what's...
Well, Louisiana, I've been with people in Texas, been with Joseph Odell in Virginia,
right,
and who also was innocent, and that's who got the Pope John Paul involved, because the Italian Parliament heard about this man, Joseph Odell in Virginia, who was executed in 1997. And they actually sent the mayor of Palermo over and a delegation of the Italian Parliament to visit with Joseph Odell. And they transported his body after he was executed to Palermo for an honorary burial. And I was his spiritual advisor. So that's how I got to meet Pope John Paul II and have a direct dialogue about the death penalty. And I said, Your Holiness, all these Catholics, good Catholic people, and they say they're pro-life, but they mean they're pro-life for the innocent, but not the guilty. They think if people did a crime, well, they deserve it, they get and they offer the death penalty, and they got that line in the sand. Can you help? Can you help our church understand that dignity, even for those who've done a terrible crime, that people are worth more than the worst thing they've ever done, and redemption's always possible. And who are we as human beings to deprive them of the rest of their lives to be able to change, to grow, to evolve? And we cut off their life and send them into eternity. What kind of arrogance is that?
What are the folks on death row that you've been spiritually advising with? How does that go? Does it depend on the individual? What is that like?
I have no idea to tell you what. It's a Holy Spirit process.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. How people pop into my life. Manuel Ortiz is the man. And I take one person at a time. So I've been with 8 people who've been executed, like in Virginia, Texas, 2 in Texas. And how did Manuel come into my life? I was with another man on death row in Louisiana, Dobie Gillis Williams, and I accompanied him all the end. And then when Dobie was executed, Manuel, who's from El Salvador and Catholic, he approached me and asked me to be a spiritual advisor, and I said yes. And so I've been with him like 20 years, accompanying him, and he's the one who's innocent. So now I'm writing that book about him to get the truth out.
You also say that the impact on victims, the impact on victims' families, rather, and obviously the family of the person either accused or convicted of murder, however it works. But you also talk about the prison guard system. Talk about that a bit, because that's an interesting angle, because you would make an assumption, not you, people would make an assumption that if you're a prison guard, you're used to seeing all sorts of things, and at some point, it doesn't mean anything to you. But that can't be true. It must affect them dramatically, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have the story in Dead Man Walking about Captain Fenton Cuddy, and he was the supervisor on death row, and he did fine. I mean, because, keeping order on death row tier and serving the breakfast, making sure. Then they moved him over to the execution squad, and his job wasn't even to strap him in the chair onto the gurney. It was just to go to their cell after they'd been executed and get their personal belongings. Mm-hmm. And he called me into his office after he'd been through 5.
Wow.
And he just said, "Sister, I'm going to have to quit this job." He said, "Look, I know they've all done terrible crimes. I know that. But I've also met them. And I've met the person inside these people." And he said, "Believe me, when you're part of the killing of them, I come back, I can't sleep, I can't eat. I just get in my lazy boy chair for the night, because I know in my gut I was helping to participate in this process of killing somebody who had been rendered defenseless." And it's the defenselessness. And that was part of my dialogue with Pope John Paul II. When you render a person completely defenseless and then deliberately kill them, where is the dignity in that death when we have a way to keep society safe and we don't have to kill people?
Do you feel that the church now is more clear about the view
Absolutely
of death penalty
clear
than they used to be, right?
Well, no, big time, because the sticking point was they kept upholding the right of the state to take life. Right. And as long as you did that, you put the state in charge of setting up their system, what the criteria is going to be, and they're in business. You got to acknowledge we cannot, no matter how terrible a crime, allow any state government or federal government to have that authority to be able to take human life. That was the 1,500 years of dialogue that happened from the 5th century with Augustine on through Pope John Paul II, with the first one to publicly in St. Louis put the death penalty in with the other pro-life issues. No to the death penalty, he said, which is cruel and unnecessary. Even those among us who have done a terrible crime have a dignity that must not be taken from them. That happened in 1997. And then Pope Francis, 2018, where then, see, the last thing you do is change the catechism, which crystallizes the experience of the community and the development morally. It's happened on a lot of social issues like slavery and a number, and the death penalty is one of them. So that then principled opposition, no exception, and then for the first time, John, we're in alignment with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says simply by being a human person, there's an inalienable right to life. It cannot be alienated from us by bad behavior. And so that's where we are now.
The Center for Peacemaking obviously trains students in conflict avoidance, ending political violence, all the issues that
boy, do we need that
you know so well. What would you recommend besides, I mean, not everybody can be involved in the organizations that you're involved in. They can make donations, they can read books and share that information. If you're talking to a student today, I know you just talked to a bunch of students, what would be your marching orders? Not everybody can have the same amount of engagement, but what would be some things that people can do to help both amplify this issue and perhaps make some changes?
Go to the margins. I mean, kids can do things like help tutor kids, English as a second language. of Spanish-speaking people in this country. They can get involved. Where's the juvenile detention center close to you?
Right.
Get involved with the young people there and their families. Get involved in some kind of way. And you know what I've discovered? That hope is a verb.
Mm-hmm.
You do hope. If you're only thinking about what you're going to do, and you're only planning what you're going to do, and you're only feeling bad about all the stuff wrong in the world, and you're not doing anything, but the minute you put your hand on a rope to serve in a food kitchen, tutor a kid, whatever, then the hope flows through you, and you begin. Hope is a verb, and you begin to do it, and then you feel it. And then you move to the next step, wherever it's going to call you.
I watched your interview with Father Martin earlier this year, and I made a couple of notes because a couple of things that you said I thought were fascinating. One is the economy of our attention. You were
That's a big
and where we are
marketing
today,
thing, you know?
with all the noise that's happening. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, and that's of course what the gospel's about too.
Right.
To attend, and that's why quiet, meditation, Vatican II, read the signs of the times, so to pay attention. Nobody is more aware of this than marketers that are coming to us all the time through our hand and our smartphones.
Right.
But the gospel can also get our attention. So peacemaking, like this center here, this podcast, to get people's attention. Have you ever thought deeply on these issues of human rights and the gospel of Jesus and what he calls to? Pay attention. What is Pope Leo saying about peacemakers, with the war going on in Iran, the connection with the death penalty? To pay attention. So then we have to, who are we tuning into? And if we just stay at that busy clip and keep filling, our minds with busy stuff, entertainment stuff. So that's why silence, meditation, the readings of the scripture of the day, that's the church getting our attention. Look at the Easter stories. Have we experienced Jesus risen in our life? Are we living in a kind of like a low-grade fever, despair, depression in our lives? Are we living? Are we alive? And that's discerning the Spirit moving in us. And Pope Francis was also big on that. He devoted 7 of his audiences to talking about following how God's moving in our life and discernment.
His statement on the death penalty and other things is on your website, and the translation is there, so people should go there and take a look at it.
Wait, which one are you talking about?
Pope Francis's.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
The whole thing is there. So it's
yeah.
fascinating and direct. So I want to get you out of here on this. Appreciate you doing this again. Sister Helen Prejean's Dead Man Walking, available everywhere. One of the end on a sort of a more hopeful but happier note. One of the things you have on your website is you believe, and I agree with you, that music is something that we should lean on more. And you have your own playlist on there. You offer people, hey, if there's some songs that aren't on this, put them in the suggestion box, if you will.
No, that's right.
I was on
campus. Justice train. Yeah.
I was on the campus here in the 70s, and I was on radio. And so some of those songs that you have there were songs that I remember. Let It Be by the Beatles, El Condor Pasa by Simon and Garfunkel. But anyway, I thought that was a nice refuge from all the hard stuff that you're
right.
dealing
And you
with.
know what I've gone to, and what I do a lot is, like I'm writing the book on Manuel Ortiz, and I'll put on Gregorian chant. See, Gregorian chant's at another level. You're not so much following the words and all, but it's at a deeper level of your soul. And I listen to some of the classic hymns that I sang as a child next to my mother in church. So it's a mix for me. I do the modern stuff too, so-called modern stuff.
Sure.
But anyway, music instructs our heart. And when we are singing, it's moving us into the next level, and when we listen. So we choose our music and then follow where it leads us.
So turn the phones off a bit unless you're listening to music to get away from some of the bad news. You still got to pay attention to that, but also to take some meditation time, as you mentioned, and learn more about these issues that you've been grappling with for decades.
And be in touch with good people doing the good stuff.
Right.
Who's in your community?
Yeah.
Where are the peacemakers right near you?
Yeah.
Get in touch with them, because being in community with people who are actually living the gospel is really, really important.
I think we'll end on that note. Sister Helen, thank you so much for your time, and more importantly, all the work that you're doing.
Look, got to do it.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can't not do it.
Okay.
Thank you. This was great.